Good afternoon, this is Binding again. I'm Andrea Lochin, and our guest today is that same young Ukrainian writer, a hooligan, the famous Ivan Semesyuk. They say he doesn't let the great masters of Ukrainian literature stagnate and rest on their laurels. He's absolutely amazing. Meet him and greet him. Ivan, to meet the requirements of today's episode somehow, I also want to look a bit trendy, so I'll do this. I do not have a baseball cap, but it still looks nice.
Мене немає бейсболки, але все ж таки. Симпатично. Тоді питання ось таке.
Question is, Semesyuk started as an artist. There were many paintings that are now in different galleries, and then it started. Semesyuk also became a sculptor, an artist, a musician, and now a writer, who has already published more than one book.
І ось тепер Семесюк – письменник, який видав вже не одну, скажімо так, книжку. Що буде далі?
What's next? Why did a man who invented slob art, or redneck art, and who was presented in the Bacteria Art Gallery suddenly start writing?
Був представлений у бактерії тощо, раптом почав займатися письменством.
It's actually very simple. It's a pragmatic whim. It's easier to write than to paint, because painting, especially since I started as a sculptor, pardon my language, is a mess. It's much easier with paints, of course.
І все в легенях, з фарбами набагато легше, звичайно, а для того, щоб написати прикольну книжку, треба просто такі...
And writing a nice book only requires a cheap laptop for 2000 Hryvnia. I used it to write 2 books. It's very easy.
І це дуже просто. Інша справа, що книжки не приносять таких якихось статків, щоб всього піднімати квартири, машини.
Це ж не картини.
Ну, власне. Однак література, на відміну від...
However, literature, in contrast to the fine art, has a very short connection with the public. You can communicate your ideas easily. If you're an artist, you do that through galleries and platforms. It is a certain demographic, and you are also dependent on geographic factors. But book is just a book. You publish it, and you're done. It's cool going around presenting it. But what if you are an artist? You go somewhere and you bring your paintings, but writers are travelers. They have to travel and promote their books all the time. Firstly, that means sitting around drinking with the cool guys. Secondly, you get to see various locations and meet a lot of different people. This is often quite effective in terms of making important connections, which then bring some additional mediated stories. So it's necessary to bring these principles of cool guy enlightenment from paintings to a new area.
З картини воно...
Це так. Я колись читав велике інтерв'ю Анджея Сапковського.
I once read an interview with Andrzej Sapkowski, in which he was asked how much time he spends working in a day. He said that, as is suitable for every adult person, no more than 3 hours a day. That impressed me, especially since I know that he's extremely effective in his work. Indeed, 3 to 4 hours a day is enough. It's just that artists, especially sculptors, are used to working hard, furiously, without rest, and even with a bad back. And if you're a sculptor, that often means poisoned lungs if you use all kinds of chemical paints. But what about writers? You write a book and then meet readers and publishers. With publishers in some fancy restaurant. Let's talk about personal things. I have a habit of wearing a wide variety of Ukrainian t-shirts when I'm abroad. I put on those with the Ukrainian coat of arms and various symbols, and then I walk the streets of Paris or Vienna. And I have one such t-shirt that makes people abroad react the same way. They stop me, look at me, make a lot of compliments, and even take pictures with me.
Дають багато компліментів щодо цієї футболки і навіть роблять фотографії зі мною, тому що я у ній вдягнений.
Because I'm wearing the one t-shirt produced by Ivan Semesyuk.
Ваня, ну я не можу, на жаль, попросити.
I cannot ask you to sing right now, because this program is about books, but I must ask about your literary creativity. What are your 2 books about? What is their message? What do you write about in them?
І взагалі, як все це відбувається? Як ти пишеш і про що?
By and large, I began to write just because I think there are not enough certain genres in Ukrainian literature.
Хотів написати книги.
I wanted to write books with a humorous component so that people could laugh.
Я давно вивчаю.
As an amateur anthropologist, I have long been studying such things like, for example, Ukrainian humor, and I see that it has its drawbacks and advantages.
Нам не вистачає з одного боку наша, так би мовити, хвалена самоіронічність.
And we often lack it. On the one hand, there is our praised self-irony. On the other hand, I think it's all a myth. I wanted to write something self-ironic about myself, a Ukrainian in general, an ordinary guy with a bag of groceries.
Собі людина, котра досі, мені здається, не стала центровим, важливим, центральним героєм взагалі нашої літератури. Проста людина з усіма.
A simple person who is still not a hero, but just a man, with all his advantages and disadvantages, dreams, suffering, and microscopic happiness. In addition, it seemed to me that there was a lack of certain genres. There are free niches in many creative markets in Ukraine. I came up with the genre agrarian mystical realism, and I started mastering this field.
Плюс у мене ж література 18+, там вживається.
My literature is mature. There's profanity in it, because we still have Les Poderaviansky, and it all revolves around him. But the potential of such ironic hooligan literature is great. There must be about 10 to 20 authors who write on simple topics with the use of profanity.
Широкий, має бути там 10-20 авторів, котрі пишуть на прості теми з вживанням цієї от самої брудної лайки.
There are many technical and philosophical tasks, for example, the desacralization of swear words, which is also important.
Що теж важливо, у нас
Some of our people are still victims of magical thinking. It seems they believe in the magic of the word, and so they're afraid of using a strong word like an expletive.
Вимовити. Ну, не всі.
When I pass by school kids, I can hear that they have no problem swearing.
Абсолютно спокійно про це
власне, вони
школярки.
немає негативної конотації, це просто слова. І от як те саме,
They have no negative connotations associated with them.
здається, ці процеси
Those are just words for them.
в авангарді.
That very same drift occurred in the world. I think these processes should also be accelerated in the literary avant-garde.
Нової такої урбаністичної пригодницької літератури. От і це такі
And of course, there's not enough new urbanistic adventure literature for me. It's nice. I also think we have few people who write in such a purely absurdist direction.
У нас мало хто пише в такому істинно абсурдистському ключі. Ну, от, скажімо, я люблю чешську літературу.
Let's say I love Czech literature and Czech humor. It is very cool and absurd. Czech culture is imbued with it.
І у нас мало хто пише так.
We have few people who write like that, perhaps only Oleg Shenkarenko, whom I really appreciate as a writer. He writes as if it were a translation from the Czech language. There is also a publishing house, Luta Sprava, with which most of such writers are involved.
Ну, і крутяться такого роду письменники. Я навіть тішуся тим, що
I'm glad its work began with publishing my book, Diary of a Ukrainian Eater. It is microanalysis of what happened in the country in 2012 to 2013.
у 12-му році, вона написана була в 13-му році, перед якраз
It was written before the Maidan, and the ending was completed during the Maidan. There are certain prophecies in it, and it is actually quite a funny story. I also call that stand-up literature, because you can just go on stage and entertain the audience with it.
Така література, нею можна просто виходити на сцену і просто розважати публіку.
Ви знаєте, Семесюк
Semesyuk reminds me of that Chekhov's character, who wrote, painted, danced, performed in the theater and so on. He does everything, but he's amazingly talented in all of it.
він все це робить страшенно талановито. Невідомо,
It
чи
is unknown what he's going to do next because he makes sculptures, paints, produces T-shirts, and writes screenplays. Now he's also a musician and he writes wonderful books. Only one thing is clear. Any framework is a tight space for Semesyuk. Actually, it's obvious. Just have a look.
погляньте на нього. Ну, до речі, про
By the way, speaking of postmodernism and the fact that all our arts are being merged one by one into some crazy masquerade and round dance.
карати хоровод, тепер Іван
Now Ivan Semesyuk is a radio host, in addition to being a painter, a sculptor, a musician, and a writer.
і письменництвом пішов у радіоведучий.
It's actually an interesting story and an entirely new experience for me. Now is the era of internet podcasts. They have really started growing rapidly, and they already cover large audiences.
Величезну вже кількість публіки.
I was invited to work on a project called About Everything, because I'm a talkative man, and I have numerous connections, lots of cool and interesting acquaintances, who are effective in their spheres. I decided that many of those people are not in the focus of media attention, even though they have things to tell. Very interesting, often in-depth processes in our society happen to them, and these people are their manifestation. I have a project, Evolution of Death, that's also pompous in honor of my book. It's old-fashioned radio. It's a new project that is only 2 years old. The project is successful enough. There's already a small gallery space, a small stage for music bands, and even a coffee shop in the Podil district. And they go on the air. By the way, Albert Tsukrenko, frontman of the band Hammerman Destroys Viruses, is the main editor of the cultural space and also works as a radio music editor. The team is young and very pleasant. There are a lot of people from the Donbass and Donetsk who moved to Kiev. They are surprisingly effective people, really the best people of Donetsk. I also found a place for myself there and have already made 1 season of Evolution of Death. Everything from street politics to Ukrainian archaeology. What is happening there as in a scientific sphere. It's all interesting. Working in media is even easier than writing books, because you basically sell your life experience. Like they say to students, work for your report card for the first year and then it will work for you. And here's Ivan Semesyuk, who does everything. He reminds me of the Renaissance titans who painted and invented things. And I will most certainly let you know if and when he starts dancing.
У мене кривенькі кудлаті ноги для танців, це діло не годиться.
My legs are bent and shaggy. That won't cut it for dancing. That would be too much. I also got into the realm of physical education. I've been studying history extensively for the past couple of years, and indeed the titans of Renaissance are the people who shaped my tastes.
Дійсно, майстри відродження – це, звичайно, люди, котрі формували мої смаки. Мені до них далеко в плані і якості, і...
I am far from them in terms of quality and in terms of amplitude. This is understandable. However, I was growing up with the library of my parents, which had works by Hans Holbein, Michelangelo, and others like Leonardo da Vinci, who wrote and traveled, were wonderful fencers, and so on. Indeed, the era of the Renaissance, the Victorian era, the literature I grew up on, really gave me the subconscious ideal of a Spider-Man. Maybe almost everything, though perhaps not all of it, is ingenious, but it is more or less high quality, and I like that approach. After the tragic events in our country and the war, Semesyuk remained possibly the only hope of mankind in the sense that he almost never got into our famous national tragic monumentalist pathos.
Знаменитий національний трагічно-монументальний пафос.
He treats the war and this situation with humor inherent only to him. And in this regard, as it turns out, he is much more valuable to Ukrainian society than all the writers of very emotionally moving and timid post-war stories and novels.
Ніж всі співці, знаєте, зворушливих і щемливих повоєнних оповідань і романів. Іване, ну, до речі, якщо можна, футбол.
Ivan, the T-shirt, if I may. What is it? Beautiful.
Срака мотика, те, що, до речі.
By the way, it is great when your guest is a writer who is also a singer and almost a dancer about your plans. Because asking writers about their plans and what they are working on is not very interesting.
Про плани, тому що у письменників запитувати про їхні плани, на те, над чим вони працюють, не дуже цікаво, вони одразу...
They immediately replied that they are working on a new book. Sitting with a typewriter, boring. But when you ask Ivan Semesyuk about his plans, that means there are a number of performances, concerts, etc. ahead.
Якихось перформансів, концертів тощо.
A writer really does not want to show their hand, because if they tell about their book, then there's basically no point in writing it. My new book is in the works.
Однак моя книжка в роботі нова, я думаю, що...
If all is well, it will be ready for printing next year by autumn. I'm not planning any artistic performances. I'm tired of painting. I'm taking a break. I produce t-shirts, but it's purely pragmatic. I myself want to wear something I don't see on anyone else. I make them for myself, but I also sell them. But generally, I have plenty of plans.
Чого я не бачу. Ну, сам для себе роблю, заодно ще й дійсно продаю. А взагалі планів, як то кажуть, громадьо.
I believe the notable and great album by the band Piratin, called Attentat, is about to be released. It is true hooligan music with quality sound and recording. I must confess that I believe God sent me great musicians.
Саундом, з якісним записом. Мені Господь Бог послав прекрасних музикантів і, то, що називається, отличних ребят.
Ну, я розумію.
By the way, about music, what does the writer Semesyuk play? Is he a soloist?
Він соліст чи...
Соліст, письменник Семесюк.
Writer Semesyuk is a soloist. I bought an Irish flute and a bansuri and learned to play them at an intermediate level.
Розманітні вісли і за рік плюс-мінус на середньому рівні навчився, що там, що називається, ісполнять.
I play the flute. The harmonica is my favorite instrument. I finally thought that I've been in love with the instrument all my life, so I figured that I should learn to play it. So this year I have practiced every day on it. That's enough for working in the recording studio so far.
Вистачає. Ну, ось цікава думка розділяти.
Here's an interesting idea to distinguish Semesyuk the writer and Semesyuk the musician. Some girls will be at your concert, and one will say to the other, "Wait, this is the writer Semesyuk," and her friend will tell her, "Shh, he's a musician here."
Ти що? Не можна. Тут він музикант. Тобто, це справді якось...
Це один і той самий.
It's the same genre, agrarian mystical realism. It also fits our music. It has a specific world outlook, but I just call it power country music. On the other hand, the literature I create is literature in quotation marks. It is in fact also actually power country literature.
Power country література.
Power country literature. Remember, just in case that perhaps it will become one of the main directions of Ukrainian literature in the future. I remind that our guest today was the Ukrainian Leonardo da Vinci, Ivan Semesyuk. You've been watching Binding. See you all in our next program.